Even
And,
for half
you
a
know, I
million.
think that a lot of the way people go about SEO is completely wrong because it's really about sales. Now, SEO, you know, it means a lot of different things to a lot of people, you know, and to me, SEO is a form of sales. And I've had people who have heard me speak, they've seen my results, and they're saying, like, you know, anybody can get those kind of results because nobody searches those terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, if all you do is look at keywords, you're missing the opportunities and you're missing how local markets work. And I'm going to, you know, so what I'm going to go through today is I'm going to go through my experience. Um, you know, I'm going to talk about my experience. And, you know, what's sort of interesting about it is this goes back many years when I started, you know, my career. You know, and I'd been in real estate. I had gone through the Coldwell Banker commercial real estate training program, which was CBRE. And, you know,
Yeah.
when I started with them, they said, you know, right in the very first 15 minutes of starting with Coldwell Banker CB, we'll call it CBRE,
Mm-hmm.
they told me, they said, you know, we're the largest commercial real estate company in the world for one reason, and that is we have a local marketing system that we teach. And if you follow the program, you will succeed. If you deviate from it because you think you know better, you think you're smarter, you're going to fail. And so, you know, I was very fortunate to learn about local marketing from the very beginning, you know, way before before people were using the internet. And so, you know, what happened was, you know, I was pretty young in the business, you know, just a couple of years in. And so, you know, what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my experiences, what's worked, and the mistakes that I've made as well, and how you can apply it today.
Cool.
And so, you know, what was really interesting is that, and I'll show you the picture in a minute, but, you know, and I posted it in the Facebook group. So on September 6th, 1992, it's like 30 years, almost 30 years ago, I sold this building at 11 Gramercy Park in New York City. Now, Gramercy is like a cool little pocket right down by Union Square, you know, which is from 14th Street to like 18th Street or something like that, sort of like right in the core. And that whole area has really grown over the years. It's surrounded by, you know, the East Village. You've got, you know, let's say you've got Greenwich Village not far away. You've got Soho not far away, and then you've got Midtown a little bit further north. And it's a really cool little pocket. And the history of Gramercy is that it's got a little park in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that lives there gets a key to the park, and it's like a wrought iron gated little park, and it's a
That's
beautiful park, not very big. And surrounding the park, you've got some apartment buildings like co-ops, and
okay.
you've got some townhouses, not many, but you have the National Arts Guild right there, and it's, you know, historically the area was uh, you know, you had musicians and artists that lived there. So, you
Mm.
know, it had that historical thing. So anyway, I get hired to sell the building. You know, I'm marketing the building. I sell it to this guy, Jelly Bean Benitez, right? You know, John
I don't know
Benitez.
who he is.
Well, you know, so anyway, so
Madonna's manager.
he was like Madonna's manager or something like that,
I
right?
think so. I think Madonna's manager or
So anyway, when I when I
Simpson
met
or
him,
something.
you know, when he was, because I did a direct deal, there were no other brokers involved.
Hmm.
Um, but he bought the building. But when he showed up to look at the building, when I took him around the building, like he could have cared less who I was. Like I might as well just been the landscaper, right? Or the garbage man. I mean, he didn't care who I was. And the seller of the building, you know, they had bought the building for like 1,700,000, let's say. They're selling it now for like 1,400,000 or something. So they're taking a hit on the building. And, you know,
Hmm.
basically the seller's going to be out of the game, out of the real estate business. Benitez doesn't care who I am. Sell the building. I get this nice big check. And I think at the time it was like an $80,000 check,
That is a nice
which
check.
was a lot of money back in 1992.
It was. I would have taken it.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
I
And
probably walked by you in 1992 while you were walking around with your check.
so
I used to
so
spend a lot
anyway,
in New York.
so I go to the closing, and super psyched, got all this money in my pocket. Biggest check that I've ever seen, really, at the time. I
Hmm.
think it was 25 or something like that at the time. And so I'm walking back to my office with this check, and it dawned on me that nobody knows that I sold the building other than my wife and maybe the guys that I work for. Other than that, the seller's gone, the buyer's gone. They don't even know who I am.
Hmm.
10 minutes later, after the closing, they wouldn't even remember my name. I'm like, well, how do I get more business with this? Like, I just sold a building. It's like, hey, everybody in the world, like, I just sold this building. How do I get more of this? And this is like the big problem, right? How do we get more business when we're good at what we do?
Huge problem
And
for
so
everybody.
at that time, I didn't know anything about case studies. I didn't know anything about press releases. I didn't know any of that stuff. So what I did was I went back to the office and I wrote this little story. And it was a little over 200 words. And I took a picture of the building and I got an 8x11 envelope and I put the article that I wrote with my own quote in it, along with the picture. And I found the address of the New York Times, and I found like a name of a writer
Hmm.
at the New York Times who had written some real estate articles, just going back, looking at some past New York Times articles. And so I sent it into the New York Times. I don't know how long it took before it was published, but I got the phone call one Sunday from somebody. I didn't even remember who called me and said, "Hey, you've been featured on the front page of the New York Times Sunday real estate section," which was a big deal.
Yeah, I would think it would have been at least a couple weeks, probably.
I don't remember. I don't think it was
At the
that
time.
quick. But anyway,
Oh
I
wow.
just don't even remember. But
Yeah.
anyway, so what happened was really interesting, because when I saw the article in the Times, I thought, oh my gosh, this is it. I just hit the lotto. Tomorrow, Monday morning, everybody in New York City that wants to sell a building is going to be calling me, because I'm the man now. I'm in front page of the New York Times.
You're a big deal.
And I have no idea. At the time, it wasn't really until I just reread that article. Like, I've got it right here. Like, I've got it. My wife had framed it for me, right? I have two of them that my
That's cool.
wife saved for me over the years. And I never read the articles. I never read them after I wrote the article. So I didn't understand why. I never understood why it was published. Out of all the things that they could have published, it's like,
Hmm.
why did they publish this?
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get all this business. And it didn't work that way.
Never does.
It was like, where's the calls? But what happened was that over time, it started to, it created trust. It created recognition. It created, word of mouth, things like that. So I had credibility. I took copies of the article. And anytime I got a lead, and I went to get a presentation to get hired to market, a client's property, I would always show them the New York Times thing.
Hmm.
And, the story was, hey, I was in the New York Times. They didn't know, but, my story was that, I know who all the buyers are. That's why you want to hire me, because I was in the New York Times. Well, that was not the case. It was just, you got to put a little polish on the truth, right? As a broker, otherwise you're not going to get any business. So anyway, so what I did was I started, every time I did a deal, I would write an article and I would send it into a bunch of local, publications. Like, maybe it would be the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. There were other publications. And what it did was, over time, it just created, like, I became trustworthy. But I never really fully appreciated why it worked. And when I read back on the New York Times article, that first New York Times article, just the other day, at John's suggestion that I should create a course on case studies.
Yeah.
So what I did was I follow a template and I've always followed a template. But when I read the article in the New York Times, it dawned on me that the way that I write articles today and the way that I've always done it is exactly the same. It's almost like I haven't really improved. I'm just following the same thing that I did. And this is what's interesting about it, is that it's had a really big impact on, my life. And, in the real estate business, I ended up on the board of a couple real estate investment trusts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was until the markets tanked in 2008, when I sort of retired in a way. I had a really, really good run in that business, in the real estate business. And I worked with a lot of different companies, and I worked with a lot of other brokers. I helped other brokers write these case studies, and I would help them submit, I showed them how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And, fast forward to today, I applied the strategy when I started fiddling around with SEO and all that back in 2008. I started to do the same things, figuring, well, what worked, in the real world?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't it work online? And I didn't know SEO at the time, but it was like, well, if I follow the same format and I take a keyword and I match it with a town, I'm going to get the rankings. And what I've seen over the years, like I've done this for other clients, and it's like, why are they getting so much business? And I've been on calls where I've said, look at this result. And I've had people say, well, anybody can get that result because there's no competition. And I'm like, yeah, but how come nobody else is going after that? And why are these things converting? I never really understood until I started to research and reverse engineer this whole story. So let me just show you a couple things.
Okay. And while you're putting that up, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So you did the article for the New York Times. Did you ever do another one again?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
and that was published too. And I didn't save them, but my wife fortunately saved them, a couple of them. But you can see, like this one over here, that was the first one. That was 11 Gramercy Park. And then here's another one.
Okay.
A year later, that was published by the New York Times.
Nice. So you do this on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah. So but I will tell you the biggest mistake that I made was because I didn't have a mentor to help me with this. Like,
yeah, most people,
certainly the guys that I was working with, they didn't want to help me because like they're like not understanding how I'm getting these kind of results. How am I getting published in the New York Times? And well, the story goes back to where I started, because what I did was I used my template and I looked at, okay, what are the key points here? So if you follow the template, what I did was I ended up telling this story in 200 words, that 11 Gramercy Park sold for whatever it was, $1,450,000 at the time. Imagine what it's worth today. It's probably worth 20 million.
Probably.
But what I did was I mentioned that, the building had gone into disrepair. The seller needed to sell it. They had bought it for $1.7 million. They sold it for $1.4 million. They lost money. They were going to turn it into condos. But the building happened to be in a historic district where a lot of musicians and artists hung out and lived. And then what I did was I put the spin, somebody named Samuel Barlow, I think it was. He lived in the building at one time, and he was a fixture in the music scene in New York City, from like 1900 to 1920 to 1980 or something like that. So what I did was I put this, I identified, it was near the National Arts Society building. The Samuel Barlow lived there. The Juilliard String Quartet used to play there. I talked about the historical significance of the building. All these things that today, if you wrote the same article, would be like keywords, unique keyword signals to Google that this is like really good information. I used different dates in the article. I think I used 5 different dates in the article.
Mm.
These, and one of the things I've learned over the years is that when you use numerical data in content, Google, even still today, they eat it up. And so what I found when I started to compare what I had done in 92 to even what I'm doing today in 2022, 30 years later, that this is what the New York Times liked.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it resonated with them. And what's really cool is that it resonates with Google, because obviously this is what people like. They like the story. There's some facts in here, but this was only a couple hundred words. And so what I did was, it's just been a very interesting experience to see the impact that it has had on me getting business and building my business over the years. I've always done very, very well. And I'm going to tell you, it comes from these case studies. I don't know what else to attribute it to, because I don't see that I'm really any different than anybody else. But what these things do is they really pack a lot of power. And I think what it really comes down to is that even more so, they're more powerful than reviews, in my opinion, because reviews are an opinion.
Right.
Now, sometimes they can be fact. I'm not going to say the entire review world is less valuable than a case study, but in many cases, people perceive reviews as potentially manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
People solicit reviews from happy customers. It's opinion, whereas a case study is fact. It's actual rock solid proof. And when we're buying something, when we see that there's actual proof that this works, that is very compelling, because at the end of the day, when anybody buys something, you've got to compete against so many different products, services, competitors, that if you can demonstrate actual proof, it really makes a difference. And what's cool about the case study strategy is that can become, like, for a local business, like if you're a contractor or you're a real estate broker, and many others, mortgage broker. If you take every single project, think about it. If you were to take every single project and you follow this formula, and you follow today, it's title tags and meta descriptions and optimizing, photos and, all the normal SEO stuff, but you're creating case study after case study after case study. Each one of them is almost like a little vending machine, because it's not that people are doing a search and you're getting all that much volume on any one of these, but they convert at such a high level. People remember them. It's a story. People remember the story. Anybody that's on here today, you might, if you read that New York Times article, you might remember me. If you read the article and you see my name, you might remember me because of the story. Oh, you were featured in the New York Times. Here's the story. I remember you. You're the New York Times guy. And what happens is that's one of the things in Gene Schwartz Breakthrough Advertising that he talks about is, or actually it's in the Brilliance Breakthrough, he talks about picture words. When you tell a story that's a factual story, it's like a movie. Like, people remember that. People remember images. So what you're doing is you're creating a story that creates, like when I tell the story of the New York Times article, people remember Samuel Barlow. They remember the National Arts Society, things like that. Those are things that you can envision. You can almost see a picture in 200 words. You can see this picture.
Mm-hmm. Hey, let's talk about a couple other things that are happening, because there's a few other things that happen with a case study like this. So
Yeah.
you're getting social proof.
Yes.
You're getting your name is being associated with the New York Times,
Right.
which, hey, who wouldn't want to be associated with the New York Times, right?
Right.
Okay, so that's a big deal. So the other thing that's happening is in a real good case study, it's easy to go down and follow the steps and reproduce it.
Right.
It's not just a news article. It's actually something that's reproducible. And
Yeah.
again, New York Times nowadays, if it was associated with New York Times on Facebook or whatever it might be, it's social proof, right? It's social proof that, hey, you sold this home, and it's been written about. So not only are you combined with the New York Times, but it's a great piece of social proof. I can show you, hey, look, here it is. I sold this home. So
Yeah.
I just
So
wanted to add those couple of things.
you want to see my template?
I do.
Okay. All right. Let me. I have a couple of them here.
Okay.
All right. So here's. Can you see my screen, or do I need to click the screen share?
You need to click the screen share.
Okay.
And I should be able to bring it up.
Okay.
Should be able to is the operative word.
Can you see my screen?
I can.
Okay. All right. So here's the first article. This is where it started. And so what I did was the other day I went through the article, and I'm looking at it from my SEO eyes today, and looking back over time and saying, okay, what are the key things? So when I'm trying to remember when I sat down and write this, how did I write this? And so I looked at some things here. 136-year-old townhouse, composer Samuel Barlow, sold for 1.45 million. Now I put this in green for a reason, because you want that comparison. That's an interesting story, right? The price difference. It was bought for $1,670,000 and was sold for $1,045,000. Here's a quote: significance for the entire Gramercy Park area. John Benitez, the buyer, he's going to do a historic restoration and keeping in the quality of the neighborhood. Now, the previous buyer was going to turn this into condo apartment buildings. That's like bad, like, the artists and the musicians in the neighborhood, that would not be in keeping with the neighborhood, right?
That's what it is now. I just looked it
So
up on Zillow. It's actually split into units today.
is it?
It is. Yeah, it's not a single building anymore. It's split into units.
So while number 11 has been in need of repair, overshadowed architecturally by the National Arts Club, distinguished composition, high windows capped by triangular pediments. I don't know where I ever got that info. You've got the Gramercy Park Historic District. You've got Anglo-Italianate design. And then you've got 50 years again, and you've got Mr. Barlow, musical gatherings here. You see musical gatherings. Blah, blah, blah. So there you go. Now, what I did was I use a template basically for everything that I do. And I'm going to show you a sample of another one today. So you're going to be able to see the backstory comparing, what happened in 92 to basically 2022.
Nice.
So you can see that, I start out with the headline, what is the project and where? 11 Gramercy Park, Manhattan. Today you would use, today I might even use some more descriptive words such as 11 Gramercy Park is steps away from Park Avenue and 19th Street. So another local signal. What is the case study about? So introduction. So I'm always writing an introduction. And so what is it about? It's sale of rundown Gramercy Park, new buyer plans to restore. So what I did was I highlighted in red, putting the historic spin of the neighborhood. And remember, this is only 200 words. Now, location, I'm always using location data. Neighborhoods, towns, cities, counties, near things. historic districts, any of that kind of stuff. You know,
Even more
transportation,
important today.
bus stops, these things all work.
Mm-hmm.
And I could show you so many different examples of how to do this. Because, you know, we're always looking for an edge. You know, Google certainly loves this stuff today. Now, type of project, townhouse in need of repair, purchased by famous music producer John Benitez. Now, I didn't mention Madonna. I didn't want to do that in that article, even though I knew who he was. I didn't want to venture that far out.
No, that was a little out of the realm.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
People already know who he is, so it's fine.
Well, I don't know, but anyway, you know, size, 5-story. Now today, I would actually mention the amount of square feet. You know, 11,252 or something, whatever it is.
Yeah,
you know, another signal. Now in the article, again, more numerical data. I used 50 years, which basically, I think Barlow, yeah, that would have been from, I think I found that he died, or I don't know, somehow I found the number 1971. So I just threw here this as a reference so you can see. But I mentioned 1966, 71, 84, 90. I mentioned the price of 1.67. I mentioned the price of 1.45. So these are all, you know, so when you sit down and write a case study, if you follow this template, you can actually write this basically on a napkin. And so now business name, now today, what I will try and do is, you know, use the name, address, phone number. Today, everybody knows that is NAP data. But in this case, you know, it was Joe Newman was the seller, John Benitez, music producers, the buyer, features and benefits. Okay. Once owned by famous composer Samuel Barlow near the National Arts Club. Juilliard String Quartet played there. You know, and I mentioned something about historical significance. Okay. Problems that the townhouse was sold for a loss and it needs repair. Solution, famous music producer plans to save the day with historic restoration while maintaining historic significance of the neighborhood. How long did it take? I did not mention this there.
No.
Now, products used, this doesn't really apply. This is, but, you know, Anglo and Italianate design. So, you know, these are the things that you can, if you start with a template like this and you just sort of jot it down, you could basically today, you could just take your template, fill it out, give it to a writer and have the writer write it, you know, because all you're doing is you're taking bullet points and then you're embellishing, you know, like even like here, you know, the Gramercy Park Historic District, you know, today, if you wanted to write something really awesome, you could talk a little bit about the historic district. You could talk about the National Arts Club, you know, things like that. And so what's really interesting is that when I wrote that article back then, it basically followed this template. Okay. So let me, so I wanted to show you that, but let me show you another one.
Okay.
And let me see if I can get it up there. Okay. Okay. So here's one that I did for years ago. I met, I was at a trade show and I was out in Vegas. I met this guy when I was first getting into the internet and fiddling around with it. I met this guy named Parker Smith, and this is a project that he got off of I don't even think it was a 300-word blog that I wrote for him. And this was an $800,000 project. He made a lot of money on this, something like $400,000 profit. He ended up subbing this project out. There's a whole story behind why he made so much money. But what we did was we wrote a blog and then we promoted it with a press release on Yahoo. And it's really the same exact format. you know, if you look at the blog, you've got your bullet points, you know, what is it about, the location, who, scope of the project, right? And you can fill this all out in the template. So let's take a look at it. So you have the article, the blog post actually starts out with a couple bullet points. And then you've got your contact and you've got all these keywords that are in the body of the content. And then we're basically rewriting in the article. We took this information here, right at the very top, all this information here. We started with that, your basic information. And we just kept rewriting it in different forms to create one article. So we started out with just a bunch of bullet points. And just by filling out this template, we ended up with, you know, here are the problems, here's all the key words that are relevant to the project. Basically, we're taking this information here and we're rewriting it in a different form again here. So you're basically taking a small amount of words and you're just rewriting and just repurposing different ways to create the article.
Yep.
And then what I did here was I used the products that he used on the project, which, you know, just it's associating him, you know, his company with Sherwin-Williams. Like you said before, you know, I was associated with the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of quality relevance to a brand, another brand, is going to be very valuable. And I've done that in a lot of press releases over the years, where you've got the word association of one business with another business that has more credibility than you might. So what it does is it elevates the credibility of the lesser brand with the higher quality brand.
Yeah, especially, you know, I mean, especially in the painting realm, when we look at, you know, all the old colonials that get painted, you know, who usually typically gets touted for all of that work? Sherwin-Williams paint. So, I mean, yeah.
So you're bringing trust into, you know, a blog and press release. Now, if you, this is another sort of a cool thing too, because what I did with this one was I wanted to, on this one here, I wanted to, you can see the headline, Smith & Company Painting Restores Wings and Waves Water Park. What I wanted to do there was, he was already ranking for, you know, all these metal and steel painting things. So it's like, well, where am I going to fit this? Because I didn't want to cannibalize what was already ranking. So what I did in this one was, I thought, what if I put in the title his name along with Wings and Waves Water Park, which is apparently a very famous water park, with the idea that, can I get him to rank for his name right underneath his website? With the idea that when people go to check him, like they find him online, okay, and then maybe they go check out his name, which is what people do. If I could get this article that was Globe News Wire, Yahoo, ranking under his name, when somebody does a search, they will see that he was featured in the press for doing this job, which is much more credible than him just saying, I did this job.
Right.
Okay. So this, if you go back and look at this here, this again, here is my, oops. Okay. Basically, here is the template. Headline, introduction, where, location, you know, project, you know, interior painting of 80-foot high water park, peeling paint on ductwork. And this was an interesting story. I didn't really get into this enough, I don't think, because the problem that they had with this water park was a very wealthy guy. I guess like the wealthiest guy in Oregon bought this. What was happening was they had the HVAC ductwork was not working for a long time. And what it was doing was it was creating the water that they used was salt water in this park. And what happened, it created a humidity in the facility, and the ventilation system wasn't flushing out the
Humidity.
the salty humidity. And what it started to do is it started to like there's like, you know, big ductwork, you know, like 3-foot diameter ductwork up on the ceiling, like way 80 feet up there.
Sure.
And what it was doing was eating away at the paint coating on the ductwork, and it was starting to drip, and it was becoming a mess. That was like the big story. But what I did here was, you know, under project, you know, famous Wings and Waves water park, sandblasting, steel, aluminum, metal, power washing, corrosion repair, you know, all these different things. You know, how big, size? Well, I used 5,000 square feet. That's the floor he did. So there was a concrete floor that he did. That was 5,000 square feet. Business name, you know, I've got his business name in the article with his phone number. And I don't know if I didn't fill this out here, featured and benefits, but problems, corrosion and peeling paint. And then here's the solution. How long did it take? 3 months. Products used, Sherwin-Williams. So, you know, that's sort of the base of it. But you can see what's really interesting if you compare, you know, we do a ton of these, you know, and I've done them for years and years and years. And I've done them for, you know, I have another article that was in a local publication. There was a building there was an apartment building I bought numerous years ago. And I did a restoration of the building. And I wrote a story about it, and I submitted it to the local paper, which was the Stamford Advocate. And they published it right on the front page or whatever at the time. And, you know, it really, you know, it was when I was getting into the, you know, at that point, I was sort of like venturing out of brokerage into the investment business. And that really put me on the map all through, you know, the 2000s until 2008 when the markets tanked. So, you know, it worked, you know, this formula is really sort of cool. You know, the thing about it today is that there's so many different ways that you can, I'm just going to stop the sharing for now.
Okay.
Let's see. Am I back? Are we back?
You're back. Yep.
So the thing that's interesting about this today is that there's to make this work, you know, let's say you know, if you're a marketing agency or if you're a company that wants to build their business, this works so many different ways. It isn't only search. It's being memorable is one of them. It's credibility. So if you have case study after case study after case study on your website, let's say, you know, on your blogs, when people see those case studies and they look at one after another, that is so different than your typical website brochure. Because what you're doing is you're showing, you know, diverse range of skills, different kinds of projects. You're identifying what you do. You're developing a brand, and people remember that. And that's where the word of mouth becomes so valuable in local markets. And that is something that is you know, in the internet marketing space that is, I see as extremely overlooked, because you want to not just do SEO or drive paid ads, you know, to a landing page or whatever. You need to find ways today of increasing that conversion. And there's so many different benefits to this strategy. It helps you, like each one of these case studies can be like a little vending machine online, but it gives you so much credibility. And today, you know, like you can use like a contractor or a real estate, you know, broker or company. When you take pictures with your mobile phone, you can use tools like Company Cam.
Right.
And the company can't, the photos don't, you no longer have to take a photo, download it, send it to somebody. You can take your photos and they will automatically populate in a file within CompanyCam. And within CompanyCam, you can actually leave notes. So you can take your photos, you can leave your notes, you can give a writer access to your CompanyCam account. They follow this template. And now your writers can create really, really great content following this formula. And then what you can do is you can take that and you can promote it with, a lot of different ways. There's all the SEO stuff, the press releases and guest blog posts and, all the normal SEO stuff. But, if you follow the formula and you stick with it over and over and over, it becomes a very, very simple formula that basically anybody can follow. Again, like I said, my biggest mistake was not sticking with it consistently. What happens is you start to get all this business and you sort of think you don't need it anymore. And that's one of the biggest issues that marketing agencies have, is that they start doing a real kick-ass job for their clients. Clients are getting all this great business, and it's like, why do I don't need any more SEO work. And you lose the client, right? So that's a big problem. But when you're doing something like this becomes more than just an SEO strategy. This becomes, you're building your brand. You're building a very, very trustworthy brand. You're building it based on proof. And I think more than anything else, that's the key. I mean, it's when it comes right down, if you want to make a lot of money, freaking do case studies and stick with it. Don't stop.
Yeah, and it's a detailed. Yeah, as I say, it's a very detailed portfolio of everything you've done. So.
Yeah, it's wild, and there's so many different ways. I never really understood the value of case studies until you, John Paduchak, said, do a course on case studies.
Yeah.
And as I started to really look at what I've done over the years, how I've helped other companies, how I've taught agencies to do this and helped other businesses of all sizes, whether it's a small painter to a big, we're doing this for some big companies now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it just is a very, very simple formula in theory. The key is that it's got to be a step-by-step system so that you can get this kind of content done quickly.
Yes.
It's got to be step by step. You don't want to spend all day trying to do the research, write this content, deviate from the system. It's like, because most people today are, what are they looking at? Are they, they're like, even the New York Times thing, how many people really read the article? They probably glance.
Probably more than we really realize.
Yeah, maybe, but a lot of times people are just going to look at the headline, they're going to look at that first sentence or first paragraph, and then they're going to move on.
Or, I mean, I remember how I was with like the Boston Globe reading the real estate section. I would often look and say, oh, that's a really interesting house. If it was one that piqued my interest, I'd read. If it's not, I'd move on to the next one. So it's probably a lot like that. Yep, would be my guess. But hey, we're approaching 45 minutes. So anything else that you'd like to sneak in final words?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, post them, in the Facebook group. And I'd like to get as much feedback as possible. I'd like to know if people, if they see if this is something they would like to know, would they like to know more about it? Because there's a lot that I didn't even touch on this about how these work. And certainly if you're a marketing agency, this is something, when you look at CompanyCam, for example. I looked at the other day, I think they have something like 40,000 users.
Wow.
A big majority of them are going to be contractors. Now, why do these contractors want CompanyCam? Well, there's a lot of, not like nice features and benefits to it, but I'm going to tell you that hardly any know how to take the CompanyCam photos and turn it into case studies. So just by reaching out to Company Cam users, if you're a marketing agency, you could turn this into a business once you have the step-by-step formula nailed. So if anybody wants to know more about it, please, please comment. I'd love to, know your feedback on this. And, at the end of the day, you can make a lot of money with it. I mean, I've put 3 kids through college with this, and lived in a pretty nice town, lived a pretty nice life based on, really just doing case studies. That's really what's made my career more so than anything else. I would say it's really.
I think so.
I've made money in a lot of different things. I've been able to apply what I learned, in the real estate business and apply it to a marketing agency. And which is, my marketing agency does very well, and it's really based on this same formula. I'm not technically strong. I'm certainly not the, I'm certainly not the strongest SEO person out there, but the kind of results. I mean, some of these results that some of these clients are, like Mitch Waldman from Cogent Realty in New York City. I mean, we've got him ranking for the World Trade Center in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And that whole formula for him he's putting 4 kids through college with that formula, so it does work over and over. So anyway, so let's wrap up and we'll talk again.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks, John.
We'll see y'all soon.